Welcome to Culture Scene and welcome to the presentation on the inheritance of the sons of Karma. Before starting the video, the presentation on the inheritance of the sons of Karma, we will review the video on Karma and the man of the sea. This first video aimed to boost self-confidence and that of their children by introducing them to the knowledge of certain aspects of our history, the history of Africa, and draw their attention to the environment in which they live, to prepare them to be ready for the challenges they will face today. Among these issues is the contact with the Europeans, which created a context of shame, fear, and lack of confidence, causing most people to be ashamed of being African, and our children to be ashamed of being African. They adopt attitudes that contradict ancestral African values. The goal of this presentation is to continue reinforcing the important idea that the black man has value. The inheritance of the sons of Karma is a presentation in which indicative questions have been prepared to help children better understand the context of the content that will be shared. As a guideline, we have thought of a few questions, namely, what is an inheritance? What is heritage? What is the purpose of an inheritance? Give examples of inheritance. How to preserve an inheritance? Who is responsible for creating an inheritance? When did the Prémenoir arrive in America and Canada? In America, yes, in America and Canada. It is understood that. As a guideline, other questions are asked and the presenter may ask additional questions based on their inspiration. We are going to define a few terms. The definition of heritage, the notion of inheritance, the notion of inheritance and succession in relation to heritage. Heritage is a set of resources that allows for building an inheritance. Inheritance, on the other hand, is a set of assets received through succession. We can talk about the inheritance of a family, a village, a country, a continent, or a people. We can also talk about world heritage. This refers to a collection of cultural and natural assets that hold exceptional interest for the common inheritance of humanity. We can also, based on the preceding definition, talk about family heritage, saying that it is a collection of cultural and natural assets of exceptional interest for the inheritance specific to a family. We can understand that there are two aspects here, a dynamic aspect and a fixed aspect. The notion of inheritance in relation to heritage has a different aspect. Heritage is a fixed notion because it is neutral and sterile. What becomes an inheritance depends on what the successors will do with it, because if someone refuses in the heritage, the thing that is refused will continue to exist, but it will no longer be an inheritance, because it will not have been passed down, and then this inheritance risks disappearing. The notion of inheritance is fertile because it is dynamic and indicates the movement over time of heritage and wealth that passes from one generation to another, which appropriates it as a source of solutions and a starting point. So, what is our inheritance today? What is the heritage that the ancestors have left? So before moving on, we can summarize by saying that inheritance is what we receive at birth or from our parents. It is what we in turn pass on to our descendants. Therefore, it involves a duty and a responsibility we must add to humanity. We must make a contribution to humanity. And to make this contribution, we must first know what our inheritance is. There are different types of inheritance, material inheritance and immaterial inheritance. Material inheritance includes physical things like the pyramids. Immaterial inheritance, or living heritage, consists of techniques and cultural practices passed down from generation to generation that have gradually adapted up to the present day. It is a know-how in the arts, food industry, health, sports, or leisure. In the dictionary, it is said that a group of people must recognize these skills for them to be considered as heritage. So we are going to visit the Grassvilles people of Cameroon and the Baoulé of Côte d'Ivoire to see a heritage element called the Endo-P, and we will look at the derivatives of the raffia palm in Western Cameroon. On the left, in the left image, what you see is the raffia tree. In the middle, it is the thread that is harvested from the leaves of the raffia. On the right, this is the wine that has been carefully and meticulously produced by the raffia. Here, We are currently in the process of making a tooth, in which the thread found in the previous image allows us to create patterns on the drawing that you see right here. So this is the making of a dope, and these patterns represent a language. They represent African culture. There are many elements that can be read by those who are initiated and know the meaning of these drawings. So here we arrive with the semi-finished product. As you can see, this is the dope that has been made right here. And here we see the outfits in front of us, with its beautifully intricate and detailed patterns on the left, the lady's beautifully crafted nest on the right, a couple. Here, the hat you see is beautifully crafted and made of natural raffia. The lady's clothing is made of raffia, and the necklace is a raffia necklace. These are the necklaces used for dowry ceremonies. I got them in Baoul, Côte d'Ivoire. We will look at other types of ancient inheritance. We talked earlier about the pyramids. One of the characteristics of the pyramids created by our ancestors is the reproduction of the golden ratio, and this unique characteristic gives them the ability to channel cosmic energies and generate balance in humans and in everyone around the pyramid and beyond. The proximity to the pyramid and the fact that the dimensions of the pyramid reproduce the golden ratio make it so that the vibrational rate of everything next to the pyramid is increased, as we just mentioned. We invite you to thoroughly research this in depth regarding the significant influence of the proportions of the golden ratio and its impact on overall health and well-being. The vibrational rate is something that can be calculated in units of Bovis, so it's not just a theory, it's something concrete and real. It has been found that the ancient pyramids were actually powerful energy centers that are precisely aligned with different constellations. And until today, no one knows the techniques that were used to build these pyramids. It is known that they were built by our black ancestors. Here we have the Blombos bone. The Blombos bone was found in South Africa in a cave in Kasibudo. And it's a bone that is 162,000 years old. And it is the origin of the geometry of the GPS that we use today. Here we have the Shango bone. The Shango bone seems to represent the earliest mathematical symbols. It was found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in 1950. This bone is 25,000 years old, and on the bone there is a series of prime numbers that are divisible by a few. Prime numbers are numbers that are divisible only by themselves and by 1. For example, 11, 13, 17, and 19. From the series of numbers found on the Shango bone, we are able to generate all possible series of numbers up to infinity, which our ancestors counted. They could perform calculations as complex as what we do today. Here, from the Blombos bone, it was understood that this bone held the genetic code that was decoded. The genetic code was decoded from the inscriptions that are written on the Ishango bone. So this is DNA. Other legacies, Other legacies we can talk about include the place of women in African society. In African society, the woman is the one who confers royalty to the man and protects the power of kings. Women have always held a prominent place in the community due to their superior abilities and mystical power. It is said that a woman's balance is between the past and the present, meaning that a woman is constantly turned towards the past because she is capable of storing a lot of information. And because of this, her intuition is very, very, very sharp, and from that she is able to capture certain information. She is able to feel certain things that ordinarily we are not able to capture, because she is able to analyze multiple pieces of information from the past, contextualize them in the present, and ensure that in a household, for example, the decisions we make are not a repetition of past mistakes. So we find several graphs, several warrior chiefs, and several female warrior chiefs all over Africa throughout history. There is Queen Zinga in Angola, Queen Ablapoku in Ivory Coast. Princess Yenega in Burkina Faso, and Queen Ranavalona in Madagascar. To illustrate the importance of women among African peoples, here you have the Moronaba, who is a paramount chief among the Mossi of Burkina Faso. This leader commands over approximately 6 million people, which is a significant number. To give you an example, the city of Ottawa has a population of 1 million people, and the Moronaba in the Mossi Empire in Burkina Faso commands 6 million people, and the place of women is extremely important. When the chief sits with his council, because there is the Moro Nabu, and then there are 15 other sub-chiefs, department heads or ministers, who will be called the Nables. So when the kingdom sits down to make a decision, the Moro Nabu is obliged to return home, ask his wife's opinion, and the next day, after his wife has deliberated, the decision is either validated or annulled. It is said that the Mossis are the descendants of Princess Lienenga. I think it was mentioned in one of the previous slides. She was a great warrior princess and highly respected of this kingdom. In my village, there was a former queen, leader of all the female warriors, and she would return and make decisions regarding all the war strategies. This village is called Bagcham in the west of Cameroon. Other elements of our culture are the remnants of the culture. Here we have the deity Lekba. It is a deity from the Yoruba pantheon. The pantheon is a sort of directory of giants, and it is found in Haitian voodoo. When I moved to England, I saw this symbol on many houses, and it is meant to protect the houses, whereas we don't think about protecting the houses. We just think that building a house is enough. Westerners, on the other hand, use the symbols of our culture because they know their power. The Ekba is called Echu in Brazil. It is a guardian between the two worlds, between the natural world and the supernatural world. Here we see in front of us the Adinkra symbols. The Adinkra symbols are a representation of the forces of the universe. They are present everywhere in us and around us. They are recognized worldwide. The Adinkra symbols are said to originate from the Akan people, which is the Akan people of the Ivory Coast. They are found in Ivory Coast, in Ghana, among the Dogon of Mali, and among the Ashanti of Nigeria. I would just like to remind you that James Gates Jr., who is the scientific advisor to American President Obama, explained that these codes, once integrated into the computer, were capable of providing elements to correct computer errors. So there are black heritages in North America, in Canada, and the United States. It has been noted that black people existed in Canada before the arrival of European explorers, long before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Black people have been present in Canada since the 1600s, before the country was established. As a nation, black people were present in the United States before the creation of the country as a nation, even before the arrival of white people. In 1715, in the 18th century, there was a war called the Yamasee War. This war was waged to exterminate all the black people who existed in the United States in the region of Virginia. The Creek Indians are currently now part of the larger Cherokee Indian group. Professor Joro Pala from James Madison University states that black Indian and white Indian lived and intermarried harmoniously before the arrival of the whites. In 1823, housing was given to black and white Americans because the government, at some point, dispossessed them of their land. So in 1823, this housing was given because they had been dispossessed of their land. And if you give land to a person, it means they are not a slave, because slaves did not have the right to own land. So they were given reparations for taking the land from black and white natives during colonization. In 1830, the lands were taken back by the United States federal government. and a compensation of $56 million was given as reparation to 16 black and white natives. Here in front, there's a black person, an indigenous chief. I said two chiefs, but actually it's just one indigenous chief that you can see on the right. The presence of blacks in Canada. Mathieu da Costa, the translator for the settlers, was born in 1859, died in 1619. 59 died in 1100, 1619, in Quebec City. So he arrived at the same time as the European settlers in Canada, but we imagine that there must have already been other blacks in Canada. So let's mention a few facts. So in Canada, blacks have been in Canada since 1749. The black loyalists arrived in Nova Scotia starting in 1749, that is. At the end of the war in the United States, after their liberation, when they were granted the right to become citizens, in Canada, as in the United States, nuts were present before the creation of the country. There was a town called Africville in Halifax. And in this town, the authorities refused to provide water and garbage removal services. And on the contrary, they created an open-air dump. And for having created this dump, they came to raze the town, claiming that the town was unsanitary. You see here, this town was destroyed. Well, this is an image found in the Africville Museum indeed. This city, you see in 1960 what the blacks had done in Canada. The town belonged to the blacks, but it was destroyed. What's the point of having a heritage? The advantage of having a heritage is not starting your life from scratch, not repeating the same mistakes. It's about being strong. Heritage allows us to discover our natural gifts and talents. What are the disadvantages of not having heritage? We will just go around in circles. We don't have a starting point, we don't have roots, and we can be easily deceived by others. What is our responsibility towards heritage? It is first to know it, and then to be able to draw inspiration from it, to create things for today. We have the duty to protect it, to enrich it, so that we can pass it on to future generations. If you know your own path, you will be able to add something to what the ancestors have done. But if you don't know your heritage, you will adopt someone else's heritage, and someone else's legacy will never be to your advantage, but to the advantage of the person who created that legacy. What can we broadly take away from this presentation? We can remember that traditions have found ways to weave through history, and we have the duty to learn them. It is indeed a language that is encoded through spoken language, through clothing, and through the smallest acts of daily life, and traditions carry, in the eyes of those who know how to understand them, the messages broken by those who came before us. The one who can recognize these elements that are broken through traditions holds the key to many mysteries and the solution to many problems we face today. It is said that our language allows us to know a part of our history. It is told that upon contact with the whites, our language is changed. Our ancestors transformed the language in such a way that they could say something everyone understands, but when placed in a certain context, it can convey a message to people who are part of the same white community, while those who are not part of this history, those who do not know this history, cannot understand. And we encoded the language like that to be able to hide certain keys, to give us the possibility of having answers today. And that means if we know our languages, we know our calculations, we know our languages, our culture, we will be able to have certain answers, of which we are the sole custodians. We are a heritage of which we are the sole custodians. And it is a secret that we can add to humanity. When we do not know our culture, we prevent ourselves from making that cultural contribution to the betterment of the world. The results of the Gamma Swiss are found all over the planet. In conclusion, it is up to you to awaken, enrich yourself, and conduct your own research to share it with us. We all have a heritage, and we must all discover and enrich it. Our heritages are unique and personal to us. They allow us to create a sense of community and a shared vision to connect with ourselves, to connect all of us. It must be known and valued. It cannot be emphasized enough We must know it, value it, and enrich it, because it is the only way to guarantee a better future for us and the generations to come. Thank you for your attention.